So someone wanted to know about the Tectal RAPD, and you should watch the video on the relative afferent pupillary defect. It's a defect in the pupil pathway on the afferent side relative to the fellow eye. And so in order to understand the Tectal RAPD, you have to understand what the normal anatomy of the pupil looks like. And so the first thing you need to know is the light hits the retina, the ganglion cell, the image is transmitted, nasal crossing fiber and an uncrossed temporal fiber, from the nerve to the chiasm to the tract, but before it gets to the lateral geniculate body, off the tract, the pupil fiber goes to the dorsal midbrain. And at the level of the dorsal midbrain, there is a pre-tectal afferent pathway, and that afferent pathway connects the light reaction to both the ipsilateral and the contralateral Edinger-Westphal nucleus. At the Edinger-Westphal nucleus, the third nerve will carry the pupil signal to the ganglion, to the iris. And therefore, even though an RAPD normally means ipsilateral damage to the pupil pathway, that's only true if you're in front of the chiasm. If you are behind the chiasm, the RAPD can go to the contralateral side. For example, in this lesion on the left that's involving the optic tract, the nasal crossing fiber is 53 and the temporal uncrossed fiber is 47, because the nasal fiber is the temporal field and your temporal field is bigger. And therefore, if you have a tract lesion on the left, you'll have a homonymous hemianopsia and on the right, but the eye with the temporal field defect, which is the nasal crossing fiber, actually has more field loss, and therefore the eye with the temporal field defect will have an RAPD. In this case, left optic tract caused right homonymous hemianopsia, and that means the right eye has the RAPD. So a right RAPD from in front of the chiasm is on the right side, but behind the chiasm could be on the left side. You need to know that that same phenomenon occurs here at the tectum. The tectum represents the roof. The roof, that's what tectum means. The roof of this aqueduct, this portion right here is called the tegmentum, the covering. So the tegmentum and the tectum. And so the pupil fiber is at the level of the tectum. And therefore we call that a pre-tectal RAPD if it's involving the pre-tectal lesion in the midbrain. And it's super important to know that because it can either involve the ipsilateral or the contralateral fiber from the pre-tectal afferent to the ipsilateral Edinger-Westphal, which is the efferent pathway, or the contralateral. And that means you can have a lesion on the right that produces an RAPD on the left at the level of the tectum. It's especially important to know this because all the visual fiber went to the geniculate body, the radiations, and the cortex, which means someone who has a tectal RAPD, a lesion right there, could literally have 20/20 acuity, a normal field, a normal OCT. The only finding is the RAPD. This is called a tectal RAPD. You need to be aware of it because other lesions live in the midbrain. Other dorsal midbrain lesions can be associated with the tectal RAPD. And if you're involving the fourth nerve, for example, because the fourth nerve crosses in the posterior commissure, a fourth nerve palsy could be associated with a contralateral RAPD, and that localizes the lesion right to the tectum, assuming there's no optic neuropathy. So you need to know a little bit about the roof, the tectum, and its RAPD, the tectal RAPD.